40 years later, a group of Esopus Indians sold off Woodstock's best land to Hendrix Beekman, whose name still lends itself to the self-styled oldest inn in America across the Hudson River in Rhinebeck. By the time Beekman died in 1716, many of Woodstock's Native Americans were gone. The indigenous spirit of the place lived on, however. There was this thing about it having been a burial ground, says Procol Harum lyricist Keith Reed, a regular visitor to Woodstock in the late 60s. It was considered that there was some real bad karma, and people shouldn't be living there. Our band was doing some Ouija board stuff and thought they'd summon up this Indian chief who was telling them to leave. 60s hippies weren't the only people to speak of the power of Overlook and its ancient burial sites. To this day, it is almost a local assumption that the mountain exercises a mystical influence over Woodstock. The fact that one of America's largest Buddhist monasteries stands on Meads Mountain Road, halfway up Overlook, lends weight to this conviction. The Tibetans say Woodstock is on a major ley line, says Elliot Landy. There's a certain energy right in this area. It doesn't exist in Saugerties, and it doesn't exist down in Hurley. When you come up Route 375 and you see those mountains, something changes in you. It always was a mecca, a power spot, says Maria Moldar, who first visited the town as a Greenwich Village bohemian in the late 50s. There are other perfectly cute towns in the Catskills, but there's some mojo there, some spirit that Whitehead found. By the start of the American Revolution in 1776, farmers, mainly Dutch tenants of Landover Robert Livingston, were living in and around Woodstock in forest clearings. There were sawmills on the Sawkill River, one of them owned by Livingston, who gave the settlement its new name after people had referred to the area for years by the Algonquin word wagconk, at or near a mountain. With its allusion to the small English town of the same name in Oxfordshire, Woodstock derives from the Saxon woodstock, which can mean both a clearing in a wood or a tree stump. It took time for Woodstock to recover from the American Revolution, when its inhabitants were under constant threat from British raiders and their Indian allies. The settlement was all but deserted at the Revolution's end in 1783. Yet 6 years later, it received township status, covering a vast and unwieldy area of over 450 square miles. Early Woodstockers survived through a combination of farming, hunting, and lumbering. But there were also apple orchards and cider mills, together with a very smelly tannery in the heart of the village. In the early years of the new century, there were even glass-making factories in the Sawkill Valley. Working at one of them were a father and son, Louis Edson Sr. and Jr., who have a claim to being Woodstock's first musicians of any note. In 1800, Edson Jr. even published a collection of hymns and songs entitled The Social Harmonist. Glassmaking brought money to Woodstock, increasing its population and bringing the first bank and post office to the area. Another source of employment came from the quarrying of bluestone, much of which found its way down the Hudson to New York City. Through the tumultuous 19th century of the anti-rent wars and of the Civil War itself, Woodstock slowly emerged from ancient country customs that included a pervasive belief in witchcraft. Churches and schools were built in the town. Tourists began visiting, seduced by descriptions of the Hudson Valley in best-selling novels by Washington Irving and James Fenimore Cooper. In August 1846, Thomas Cole, founder of the Hudson Valley School of Painters, climbed Woodstock's most famous mountain and coined the phrase the Overlook after seeing its south peak. Such was Overlook's appeal to romantic travelers that plans for a hotel at its summit were made within 2 years of Cole's climb. The Overlook Mountain House opened its doors in June 1871 and, in late 1873, was visited by President Ulysses S. Grant. Artists and consumptives followed, though rarely in numbers sufficient to make the place financially viable. The Mountain House, and similar travelers' hostelries, such as George Meade's boarding house, helped turn Woodstock into a semi-fashionable summer resort.